It's almost impossible for a brand to build a product or service or anything around trends. They come and go so quickly that by the time you think that this social media platform is relevant, it's already gone.
Hey, what's up, branding expert? Arek here, and welcome to On Branding Podcast. And today I have a very special guest, Clint Runge. And Clint is the CEO and founder of Archrival, which is a youth culture agency that reinvents how brands win the hearts and minds of young adults. So Clint has worked with some of the biggest brands out there, including Red Bull, Adidas, AT&T, Google, Starbucks, Mario, and many more. Hello, Clint. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you. Basically, you help brands with marketing to younger audiences. So this is what you specialize in, to teens and 20-something, right? And you help them with insights, strategy, and creative, and in general, building brand communities, right? In your view, how has marketing changed to young adults over the past decade? What do you think?
I think marketing used to be very top-down, which is people in a big boardroom or behind closed doors would come up with the ad campaign and come up with, here's what we need to tell people about our product or service. And I think largely for the past, let's call it since the Mad Men era, that's been the way marketing and advertising has been done. I think now the real flip is it's not top-down, it's bottom-up. And I think now the soul of creative and what needs to be shared starts with the people, the users, the end product, the people who are doing it. Now, it's not to say you can't craft that from above and help guide that, but it's a different relationship than it used to be.
And I've watched your speech about the funnel and how it has changed. I think it's very interesting, and I think our audience, our listeners would appreciate if you could perhaps you can just go over your funnel and talk about some of the key takeaways from that video that I saw on Vimeo, how this cycle changed. Can you just give us some key takeaways from that?
You bet. Yeah. It is essentially describing that model further, right? So if the traditional funnel that we like to think about starts with this, like you have to get awareness, and then awareness leads to people being interested in your product, and it just starts to go down and down until you capture them and they become a user, or even more, they become loyal to your product or service. That traditional funnel of awareness, interest, consideration, intent, purchase, that's the one that's messed up. That is a top-down thing. And look, there's still some truth to it, though. It's not to say that all of this is garbage and bogus. It's just evolved. I would think that the idea of awareness and interest is really something that is more together. It's not one step then leads the other. And the same thing where I would take the traditional stages of consideration and intent, I would put them together. So let me just explain that a little more. For an awareness and intent, that idea of becoming aware and also becoming interested, that is essentially occurring at the same time now on social media. These aren't separate moments. I'm scrolling so fast through my device that if I become aware of your product, I have enough time to stop and pause and listen to your ad, your content creator talk about it. I'm interested because you're probably the same way as me. If you're not interested, your thumb just flicks. So awareness and interest happen at the same time, and that's just instantaneously. At the same time, if I start thinking about consideration and intent, that's really an explore mindset. If the first one's inspire, then this is about exploration. And if I'm considering it, I now have the tools to go instantly deeper on that product. What are the people saying? I look at the comments. Or people like this? I can find what other people want to say about it. And so if I'm considering it, I'm probably intending to buy it. That happens also at the same time. So take that funnel and really think about it as two mindsets that your shopper is in. It's inspire and it's exploration. Those two things are really the mindsets that we're after. And if I could even elaborate further, those aren't separated. They're happening at the same time. Sometimes I'm in inspire mode and I'm scrolling through content. And then sometimes I'm in exploration mode where it's like suddenly now I'm on this side and I'm digging deep into a product, but then I back right out and go to inspire. It is not a clean funnel. It is a messy, chaotic world of marketing and advertising. And to think that you can somehow capture people in individual stages is very difficult.
Yeah, that's a great distinction, and I found it really interesting. So you argue that it changed a little bit just because of social media and how young audiences interact with brands. And what I really found interesting as well is that you mentioned that Gen Zs are not really looking for brands these days. They are looking for a lifestyle. Can you just elaborate to our audience on that? What does it really mean that they are not looking for brands to buy brands, but they're looking for a lifestyle.
This is an interesting one because we still talk a lot about lifestyle. That is essentially driving decisions and purchases. But really what's going on behind the scenes is that I'm looking for something that meets me in the moment. More so than if I think about like loyalty, for example, the idea of loyalty is dead. I'm just looking for something that meets my stage today and not something that I'm buying with the intent that I'm going to have forever. So there's a more authenticity, a consistency, and a transparency to my transaction that meets me today versus some lifestyle that somehow I'm this person and I'm this person forever. That's just not the case. I'm changing. My personality changes on moods. It changes on my day. It changes hour by hour sometimes. And so because of that, who I am, my lifestyle essentially also is always changing. I'm not one demographic or one psychographic. I'm many. I'm a complicated young adult. And I think if marketers and advertisers start treating it that way, you have results.
So you advise that we should focus more on building brand loyalty, building brand communities and things like that. Can you just walk us through your process, your typical process? So let's say whether there is a big corporation who want to work with you, and so they want to make themselves more relevant in the culture of young adults, or perhaps there's like an up-and-coming brand that has a great product or service, and again, they want to be relevant. They want you to help them to become relevant. So what's the typical process, if you can just perhaps walk us through the stages of your strategy, creative, how do you work with clients?
Yeah. First of all, there's an ethos that has to happen, which is there is this old world that exists where brands are in the center of the world and it's all centralized planning. And I have a linear consumer journey that we talked about. And I have predicted culture moments like, oh, we're going to operate around back to school, like these sort of like highly planned calendarized things. That's like old world thinking. The first approach is to realize it's all messy now. Culture happens like that, something pops up, and I have to be ready for that. It's not planned in the calendar that suddenly my product became relevant overnight or someone said something online, and I have to be always on. And so there's an ethos first that has to we understand that people are at the center and not the brand itself. We're working with decentralized networks and the consumer journey is very fluid. If you believe that, then it's really obvious. What you do is you build a brand community. You employ and acquire champions for the brand, and you do that transparently, but we recruit the people who are much better suited to talking about our brand or service to their networks, to their communities, far better than we are able to do it. And so what we do at Archrival is we go and we find those people. Now, you might think of these as influencers, that's almost shortcut them. That term is too limited in some ways. Sure, they're influential, but these are people who really believe in your brand. They're probably users of it already, but there's something much deeper. They love the ethos. They're there with you. And when you find those people, and that's what we do, is we recruit and find those people. We find and recruit. Then we activate them and we connect them. And when you have this powerful network of people working on your behalf, then you can meet the consumers where they are. You meet those culture moments much faster and much more relevant than you can do at a brand headquarters miles and miles away.
Right, in a traditional way. Yeah, so this all makes sense. And what do you think, what are some of the emerging trends in youth culture currently that you are currently excited about? We have AI, we have things changing rapidly. What do you think? Are there any trends emerging?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Here's how I like to think about trends. All right. I think that most people think about trends as something that is cool right now. And it is, and while we want to be familiar with what's cool right now and what's happening, it's almost impossible for a brand to build a product or service or a fashion line or even create new music or anything around trends. They come and go so quickly that by the time you think that this social media platform is relevant, it's already gone, okay? Before you can get your strategy figured out and content built for it. So I try not to capture or chase what's cool. I think that's almost impossible. It is more possible with people, but it's almost impossible for a brand, a quality brand to do that. What is possible though is instead of asking what's cool, ask why something becomes cool, why something becomes relevant. That is something that a brand can build products and services, build a business around. So if we know where our consumers are headed, then we can create the content, the products, the tastes, whatever, to meet them where they will be. And that's where I try to spend my energy with brands. Why does something become relevant? Where is that headed? Let's go there. And that might be a year to 3 years out. That we can plan for, that we can meet with a level of excellence that Gen Z is going to expect. And so I try to spend my time there. So what are those kind of things? I call those maybe more macro trends than trends. And that's when you start getting into, wow, Gen Z's in the workforce now, and you start to see how work is going to have to adapt. And you look at, I'll just give you this one because it's top of mind for me, but we have this thing here at Archrival we talk a lot about called gatekeeperless. And the whole idea of gatekeeperless as a macro trend is that your brand is no longer owned by you, okay, you, the corporation. As soon as you try to change your logo, look at several examples, people, they say, no, we hate your logo, and then you have to change it back or something like that. So you're not in charge of your brand the way that you used to be. Instead, the gatekeeperless community is, we're in control. And those that think they are the culture makers behind closed doors are no longer those people. And that's true in almost every industry you can follow. So if you take a gatekeeperless approach, that changes the way you start creating brands, creating products. Instead of us coming up with it, we crowdsource that. We ask our most influential people. We find our experts in the network we can listen to. Now, we're still responsible for creating that product, but we do that not alone and behind closed doors. We do that with the people. And by the way, that goes into our last conversation. That makes it a lot easier to market too, because their voice is heard inside the product.
So it makes sense. You don't chase trends. You rather chase people, like meet people where they are, where they want to be. And basically people define brands these days more than anything. Like we can try to define a brand in a particular way, as you mentioned, behind the closed doors, but ultimately it's all about the perception. And yeah, but also those who work in branding and marketing, what kind of advice would you give them, those young adults who want to work in marketing and branding field? What do you think? What's the most important thing now to focus on?
I would say to all of them, you are on the cusp. You are the representation of this new universe versus the old world. And because of that, you are going to come up against the red tape, the traditional methods, the old belief systems. And you have to know that you are the champion of a new idea. And so it's going to be hard. You're going to have to convince people, right? You're going to have to prove it to people. But if you're able to do it, boy, the whole future of marketing is yours. Even in the coolest brands that we work with, there's still this internal struggle of the young generation who has a belief system that goes against the grain of those who are their elders. And look, neither are wrong, because you have that expert, you have the experience that's happening in the old traditional guard. But boy, the new energy that's come through, you gotta let that flourish. Now that's not gonna be easy, but to all marketers, is just don't give up on it. You gotta fight for it. And you don't get that by just leaving the organization and quitting. You got to stick around and fight for it, because if you're able to do it, your career is going to go so far, so fast, because the doors are going to be open for you. I think we're on the cusp of that moment right now.
So don't be afraid to go against the grain, basically. You will still probably have to get familiar with all the techniques.
Of course.
But then also be open to change. As you mentioned, champion the change and try to go against the grain.
Yes.
And that's how you can become successful and relevant because marketing, branding is constantly changing.
Change is hard, right? Change is hard. No one likes to change. Change is difficult. It's uncomfortable. I got to come up with, I got to learn more things. And of course, the younger you are, the more adapt you are to that, because you're not as set in your ways. And the older you are, the harder it is to change. And just understanding that allows you to have that conversation. Approach that with respect and diligence, but do it with boldness, because you're right.
That totally makes sense. Okay, it's been great talking to you. We're going to link to your website. Your website again is archrival.com. It's a beautiful website for you guys. I advise you to check it out. Great work, obviously. You have some articles, you have some content also on the website. And what's the best way to connect with you? Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn is really great. I'm pretty active on there in terms of messaging. Anyone can hit me up there. Of course, my email is simple. It's clint@archrival.com, which is also found on the website. Happy to have a chat with anyone anytime about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Good luck. All right, see you, everybody.